This video tutorial is going to show you how to add sounds and sound controllers to your tabbed application. So we're continuing to work on the tabbed application that we had been working on in the previous tutorial. The only difference is that I've updated to Xcode 6.0.1 and the latest SDK. And everything works as it should. Very happy with the new interface. It really is not that much different from the old interface, so you shouldn't have any trouble figuring things out. They're all pretty much in the same spot. A couple of things look different. You select the view controllers by clicking on the top of the view controller itself rather than the bottom. But apart from that, pretty much everything's the same. This was our third view controller screen that we created and we added our animation to last week in our tutorial. This week I'm going to modify our second view controller here, and I'm going to add some sound objects and a few controllers to get you started and let you go ahead and try doing this with your own tabbed app. And to begin with, what we want to do is add a sound to incorporate into our program. I'm going to minimize the Xcode screen, and you can see I've got a couple of sounds on the desktop here. You can use AIF files format, you can use .wav format, you can use .caf core audio format, but I'm just going to use sound 1, sound 2 AIF. I'm going to click and drag them into my Xcode window, into my app to use them. However, I want to put them somewhere where I can keep them organized, and to do that I'm going to go over to my Project Navigator window and open up the supporting files folder, and I'm going to click and drag my sound in there. And it says, where do you want it to go? Do you want to copy the item if needed? Yes, I do. If that's unchecked, make sure you check it so that it actually copies the file into your app. So it includes it, bundles it in there. And then I'm going to also check Add to Target my tab app. So I'm going to make sure I have those two checked. And then click Finish. So now I've got one sound in there. I can click on it to preview it. You can, wow, kind of loud, but it works. So I can go ahead and add my second sound. I'm also going to add to target my tab app. So I've added two sounds in here. You can reorganize everything, as you probably figured out, in the Project Navigator area by just clicking and dragging objects if they're not in the order that you prefer. So I've got my sounds in here, and the important next step, though, to adding any kind of audiovisual objects into your application is that we make sure that we've got the correct framework. So that we have classes for sound objects, and that we can instantiate sound objects and players and those sorts of things. And by default, this is not bundled with this tab template. So, however, when you download the large Xcode application, part of what you download is a whole bunch of frameworks that you can use with your apps to incorporate different classes that you need for different purposes. And one of those is something called the AV framework, AV Foundation framework. So to add a framework that you want to use to incorporate objects into your app, you have to go back to the top of the Project Navigator, to the Tab App application itself, and you come to the General Configuration screen here in Xcode. And by the way, I'm going to expand the Xcode interface to fill the screen. And so you can see down at the bottom of this window, it says Linked Frameworks and Libraries. And I've got the Core Graphics Framework, UI Kit, which you've seen us use before, and Foundation Framework, which you've also seen us use before. So these are the basics for running any app. But to use sounds, I'm going to have to import the AV Foundation framework. To do that, I click on the plus button and I locate the AV Foundation framework and I click Add. And so it adds that framework in there, and I should have access to all sorts of sound players and classes that I can use to play my sounds. So now I can go back to my main storyboard view, click on that, and I can select my second view controller screen, and I'm going to also go to the assistant editor here to open my code. And if I click on that, notice it is contextual, so it knows that I want to work with the second view controller. So it's taken me to the second view controller M file, but I want to go to the header file. So I'm going to choose second view controller header file. And here is my header file. But in order for me to actually use my sound objects, I need to import the framework into this header file in order to use those sound classes. So the first thing I'm going to do at the very top of the header file is I'm going to say pound import, and I'm going to say AV Foundation. Notice that it hints at it. It says, oh, you want to use the Foundation framework that you've added to this app. So I can click return and replace the quotation mark with the angle bracket here. I also want to get rid of that first quotation mark. Don't want that. So it should just be these angle brackets and the AV Foundation.h. And so now I'm ready to go in here to the header file and add my audio player class in here. So after the first declaration, the at interface declaration line, second view controller, UI view controller, enter a curly brace, hit return. Notice it closes it for us automatically. And I'm going to say I want to have an instance of the AV audio player. And I use this pointer to actually allocate memory for and space for a sound object that I'm going to call the audio, and semicolon to end that line. Now I'm ready to add my sound button to play a sound to my interface. So I'm simply going to go over to the view controller window and click on the label that I have in there and a couple of these labels and get rid of those. And I'm going to go over to my object library and click and drag a button out from the object library, and I'm going to call this sound 1. And so I've got my sound 1 button here aligned the middle of my screen, and so I'm ready to add this to my code. And you recall from the last tutorial, it's the same procedure. We're going to click and drag from the button up into the header file, and we're going to choose action. This is an action button, and I'm just going to call it sound 1. And the rest is the same. I'll leave it type ID, touch up inside as usual, and the argument sender, click connect. So now I've got my sound button hooked up to my code, and in order to play this sound, I have to link it to the actual file that I've imported. And to do that, I move to the implementation or M file, second view controller M. And you can see here is my IB action sound method already in there, ready to go. And so the code that I want to add in here is going to be ns string. Bear with me here, a little bit of code. And we'll have this app up there for you to look at as well. Path. So we have to describe the path to the sound. And to do that, we're going to use 2 square brackets and ns bundle main bundle and then after that first square bracket we're going to say path, path or resource. That's great. And the path for the resource is going to be the @ symbol here and sound 1. So we want to make sure that we have exactly the right notation. So sound 1 is the correct name of the file. Notice I didn't put the whole file name because that comes later here. Of type, and this is going to be of type @ symbol again, and it's going to be AIF. Close quotation marks, and then close the square brackets. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add an instance of the audio itself. So we're going to say the audio. So this is the audio player, AV audio player class. And once again equals double square brackets. This time we're going to say AV audio player alloc after square brackets, and we're going to use the alloc init method, but this time it's init and with contents of URL. That's correct, so that hint looks good. Contents of URL colon, and then we're going to say square bracket ns URL space file URL with path colon, and we're just going to say path here. Close the square brackets, and then instead of error ns error auto releasing, we're going to replace that with null. And we can explain more when we use null as part of one of our PDF tutorials. And just the last piece of code here to make this actually play is we're going to add the audio, surprisingly, play, and then close the square brackets, semicolon, and let's test this, build and run. Notice I'm previewing to an iPhone 4S just because it gives me a little bit of a smaller screen for this screen capture tutorial here. And I'm just going to build, and here is my app running. You can see it looks like it did before. We've got our first view, our third view over here, and here's our second view with our sound, and then I click on it, but there's no way to stop it. Yikes. So we have to figure out how to add a stop button as well. So I'm going to go back to my second view controller header file, and I'm going to add a few objects here to control my sound. So I'm going to need some more buttons. So I'm going to add a few more sound buttons here. I'm going to drag a button out up against the left align here. Click on this. I'm going to call this button stop. And drag another button. Notice I can align it here nicely. And I'm going to call this button play. And one more button as well here. I'm going to call this one pause. So I should be able to do all of these as part of the AV Foundation framework, as part of the framework and the classes that I have available to me. So I need to just add the code to make these work. So the stop, I'm going to click and drag that into the header file, release it, action, and I'm going to call this stop button, ID, touch up inside sender, click connect, get play, release it, action, play button, click connect, and then the pause, click and drag, release that, action once again, pause button. So I've got all of these three buttons connected, and maybe I'll just leave a space after that one and group those together a little bit, just for neatness. And then I switch to my implementation M file here. So I've got all these methods down here ready to go, and all I do is I go in here and I'm going to say the audio stop, for the IB action play button. Surprisingly, this is going to be the audio play again, and then the last one is the audio pause, semicolon. And with any luck, this will all be able to control my sound. Now these buttons are going to be a little bit too low on my iPhone 4S screen, so I'm kind of in a little dilemma here just because of the screen capture tutorial that I'm running. I'm going to have to choose something like the iPhone 5, which will let me see these buttons on the screen, but won't be too big for the tutorial. So I'm going to choose iPhone 5 instead to display, build and run. And here is my app running. I go to the second view, which is where my audio is. I click on the sound, it starts. Now I can stop it, play it again, or pause it. So there you have how to add a sound and some controllers to your app. Please go ahead and experiment with this, adding multiple sounds, and see how all these different objects in the AV Foundation framework will work for you.